Hi. Having just heard all about digital Bristol, we're going to go straight back to the streets and places of the physical Bristol. So I'm feeling a bit, should possibly have got a bit more digital stuff in here, but let's see how it goes. I'm going to start with a grammatical error. I thought quite hard about this, and I thought, I'll see what kind of audience it is, whether I'll get away with putting an in at the end of the sentence here. But essentially, this is what I want to talk about, is this the civic society. We're talking about Bristol, and the question is, what kind of a world do we want to live in? And we've heard Alison talking about focusing it around behaviour and people and what we measure. We've heard Paul talking about the digital world. At the moment, we've got a lot of traffic. And there's good sides and bad sides to that. Now, I've spent the last 12 years working in government, mostly. I worked with the Cabinet Office on world-class places and how the four main elements of creating high-quality towns and cities. I helped to launch the Green Infrastructure Partnership, looking at how we bring green space into the heart of our cities and how we get the water, the wildlife, everything else working within our urban environments. I helped to launch the Big Tree Plant to get 1 million trees planted in communities up and down the country. So I've been working on what kind of place we want to live in for quite a few years now, and now bringing that expertise into the transport sector. When people think about the kind of place that we want to live, we've got some great examples in Bristol. Park on Park Street back in the summer was a fantastic time when everybody came together and just actually rediscovered what a fantastic place that is. Yeah, the stores came out onto the streets, there were things to do, food, stalls, music. It was a really lively, vibrant place. But unfortunately, that's not how we experience our city a lot of the time. Most of the public realm in Bristol, most of the time, is given over to the roads. So, as Alison was saying, the pedestrians, the people, the 90% who are getting around the city, are kept in quite a constricted place. And this is a cartoon from the Swedish Road Administration, a guy called Carl Jölg, just illustrating the difference in the amount of space that's given to different users of our city environment. This is a bit of fun, really. This is from a fantastic illustrator, going back to Copenhagen again, called Copenhagen Eyes, looking at the history of traffic engineering, or our streets. So we started off in the 1800s, everyone was walking, or if you were really rich, you were getting around by horse. So generally, it was pretty easy to get around our cities by walking. As things developed in the 1900s, we invented the bicycle, started bringing trams, but it was still pretty easy to get around places. When the car came in, the car fitted around the streetcars, it fitted around people walking, it fitted around what was already happening. But after the war, we completely refocused how we designed things to focus our streets and our transport systems around cars and how do cars get around, and everybody else had to fit in around, which means now if you want to cycle around Bristol, if you want to walk around Bristol, it's pedestrians that are waiting at the crossings, and having to cross over the dual carriageways and everything else that surround the city. So we've taken a relatively straightforward journey and made it much more difficult to get around. And that growth of traffic has big consequences for our quality of life. The air pollution stats that came out from Public Health England this year are actually pretty shocking in terms of what the long-term exposure to the pollution in that red area in Bristol has to our long-term health. Our children are possibly going to be the first generation who don't live as long as their parents, because the levels of inactivity inherent in getting driven to school, getting driven everywhere, means that they're just not building up that fitness, that quality of life, that health. Bristol's expecting the population to grow by 22% by 2037, I think the stat is. The enterprise zone the various enterprise zones across Bristol are going to lead to a workforce growing by 27,000 people. So we're going to need to get more people into more places. And if we can get this digital revolution happening, all these businesses coming into Bristol, we've got to work out how to get those people into the city centre. And we're not going to be able to do it by everybody driving in. So we need to change the way we're thinking about these things to actually look at how much space different types of mobility take up, so that we can get those people into the city and begin to tackle some of those problems inherent in the way we've been designing things since the war. Alison's talked about New York already. And some of the amazing work that they've done there in taking road space and turning it into public space and public realm that people can enjoy, places that people want to stop, and enjoy life. New York's not the only place they've done it. There's various places around the world. I don't know how to pronounce this place, in Seoul, they've actually taken out a multi-storey motorway and restored a river. This has made a massive difference in the air quality in this town. There's wildlife in the centre of the city that they haven't seen there for years. It's really revolutionised the way that things are working there and had massive beneficial impacts for the people as well as the wildlife. In Madrid, they've taken out motorways in the centre of the city to create a new parkland. And the health of the populations around that area are already being seen to improve. And I could go on and give a whole load of more examples of places like Portland and San Francisco and lots of places where people are taking out urban motorways and the kind of major car-focused infrastructure from the last 40, 50 years and bringing things in which are actually helping to improve the health and quality of life of cities. But it's not just Italy, it's not just Denmark, it's not just America. We've done it here as well. Queen Square was a dual carriageway post-war, and it started off as a traffic experiment in the way that Alison was talking about. There were boulders put at each end to see how that worked, and at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium, we created the fantastic Queen Square, which is now an absolutely core place for Bristol in terms of the civic life, all kinds of events happening there which bring people together and create that society that we want to live in, the kind of place that we want to live in. College Green, another place where there used to be an A road going right alongside the cathedral, where we've created a high-quality public space which is used for all kinds of things, even driving tanks past demonstrations and that kind of thing recently. But it brings that vitality into the heart of the city. The Bear Pit is an example where it's kind of happened the other way round, where there's a traffic-free space already, and people have taken that and made it a place through the activities they do there, through the identity that they've given it. And now the council's going in and looking at redesigning to make it easier for people to get to and from that space without going through the underpaths. White Ladies Road is another example where we've taken a major route through the town and put in trees and stopping spaces and just made it a much nicer environment. So why aren't we doing more of this? There's an ongoing debate within Bristol, which you'll all be aware of, from the kind of the Park on Park Street, which was the idea of the Park Street traders, about bringing that vitality back, raising up the quality of that street, and others who are concerned that if people can't drive, if people can't park, my business is going to go downhill and we need those parking spaces. But actually there's been quite a bit of research into this over the past 10 years or so, starting, well, I don't know where it started with, but CABE's Paved with Gold study looked at what the impact was of the quality of place in the urban environment, and they measured places from 0 was just a nice, straightforward urban area, -3 was a really poor quality environment, +3 had everything you'd want in a good quality urban environment. And they found out that just increasing 1 point up in those scales each time actually had big impacts in terms of the value of the retail space as well as the residential properties around there. So actually investing in the quality of the public realm pays off for businesses and for people. There's a famous study from Graz in Austria looking at what shopkeepers think, how shopkeepers think people travel to work, to their shops, and how they actually do. And Sustrans recreated this study in Bristol, in Gloucester Road and Church Road in 2006. And what we found was completely consistent with what people found around the rest of the world, which shopkeepers actually assume that far more people get to their premises by car than they actually do. They actually think twice as many people come by car than in fact do, and they underestimate the amount of people who are walking, cycling, catching public transport to their premises. In fact, people travel much shorter distances than shopkeepers tend to assume, and they use a much wider range of transports. Alison was talking about the way you look at behaviour, create places that people want to stop, people want to linger. Pedestrian areas, well, we saw the figures in New York. The figures in New York blow any of these out of the water. But actually, if you create those really high-quality places that people want to come to, that does create a retail uplift and does create returns for businesses. Another Copenhagen example, looking at actually, when you look at over the year, who's spending the most money in Copenhagen, it's the cyclists. probably not surprising given the modal share of cycling in Copenhagen. But it's a similar story in other places, such as Portland, where actually when you look at the spend of people, I think this is on a monthly basis, then people who are walking and cycling are spending more than motorists in Portland. And actually, when you look at these figures, it varies in different places around the world, depending on the culture, the behaviour, a whole range of other things. But what tends to happen is that motorists will spend more on a single trip, but your local people, your walkers, your cyclists who are travelling those short distances, may be spending less per trip, but they're there a lot more often, they're visiting more shops. So designing these places for walking, for cycling, for helping people get into the city, actually can have benefits for businesses if it's done in the right way in the right places. So I've looked at how our urban transport systems are currently make it difficult to get around. We've looked at New York and the example there of reclaiming some of the street space, and the examples of the places in Bristol where it's really worked, and we've created places that people have really enjoyed being in. So what are we doing going forward? There's some fantastic examples of communities in Bristol who are really engaged in shaping their own places. This is just one of the illustrations from the Redcliffe Way neighbourhood plan, looking at how they can completely rethink that space and redesign it to create those shared spaces that the people want to bring that vitality into the heart of Redcliffe. The Metrobus plans for the centre are actually, if you look at the area up by the cenotaph, that's taking out whole lanes of traffic to simplify that flow and rebalance the priorities in favour of the pedestrians. Old Market is another area the council are working on at the moment, where at the moment you've got that very busy roundabout with those old kind of escalator bits which are no longer usable. I'm told that all of that is going to get sorted, and we're looking at actually putting through a route straight through the middle of that roundabout to link again that historic market part of the city with the city centre and everything that's going on there. A bit further afield and looking at a different mode, Eastern Way, we're looking at, the council again are looking at putting in cycle paths and improving the walking environment. Clarence Road, we're looking at the first dedicated Dutch style, apparently, cycle lanes in the UK, which are going in at the moment. So there's a whole lot of things which the council is already doing, communities are already doing to improve the public realm and make it easier to walk and cycle around Bristol. I chair the Transport Action Group of the Green Capital Partnership, and we've got more than 300 people on the circulation list for that group. We generally get 40 to 50 people along at meetings, different 40 to 50 people each time, which makes it interesting. But there's a whole series of ideas in there about how we can shape the town to try to make it easier to walk around the urban area. The picture at the bottom there is from the urban realm movement, I've forgotten the phrase, but the strategy, looking at how we can actually make the centre far more permeable. And we're looking at working with communities in the centre, in places like Park Street, Gloucester Road, Knoll, at how we can improve the quality of the streets from the bottom up with the people to create those places that people want to be living and working in. We were each asked to bring 3 points at the end of the presentation on kind of what our call is for the civic society on all of this. And I think it's actually really critical that we're working with the civic society and other organisations in Bristol who really care about the fabric of our city to look at how we can do these things in ways which work for the historic fabric and for the people, as well as, rather than looking at things in just as transport, as water, as energy, we need to look at planning the city as a whole in its totality. So I'm really keen that we work with civic society and others to make the case for reprioritising the roads, to get that balance back between cars, pedestrians, cyclists, public transport, that we engage with the civic society on working with those communities and raising that awareness that actually we do need to change. With the population growth that's coming into Bristol, with the number of new jobs that are coming, we have to find those ways of getting around the city in ways which are good for people and for planet. And as Paul was saying, actually a lot of those digital companies, the people that work for them that we're trying to attract, actually they're looking for this kind of high quality environment. Thank you.